Jen, my wife, we were married, so I can call her that, and I thought that the first 4 years of our marriage were happy. We met in college, where I was captivated by her stunning looks, and she was genuinely interested in my ambitions, not just my plans for the evening. I studied hard in business school, and she devoted herself to her studies in education, and we fell in love. After graduating from university, I started my own consulting firm, and the first steps were very difficult for me. I worked 80 hours a week and was constantly worried about how we were going to pay the bills. I was going through a difficult period, and Jen was an incredibly strong support for me. She brought me energy drinks at 2 a.m. when I was programming and cheered me up when clients didn't respond. At the time, it seemed like she was willing to put her teaching career on hold to help me build my dream. Looking back, I realize I should have noticed the signs. When my business started bringing in a decent income, we bought a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood. However, Jen became deeply involved in her local church, leading women's groups, organizing charity events, and constantly posting Bible quotes online, always extolling family values and the sanctity of marriage. But around the 4th year, I started to feel that something was wrong. It started with small changes. She didn't ask how my day was, and our former casual conversations seemed rehearsed, as if she was just pretending to be present when she was really somewhere else. I would ask her about her Bible study and who was there, and she would respond quickly and evasively as if she wanted to talk about something else. I suspect she didn't know about my income before, and wasn't aware of our family budget, given her sudden new interest in our finances. My personal finances. I hadn't minded her having credit cards or her not delving into the details of my business life for advice. This time, she was specifically interested in how much we earned and how much my business was worth. At first, I just thought she was trying to be more involved, but soon I caught her photographing financial documents I had left out in plain sight and even rummaging through my work files one night. She claimed she was tidying up, but she was actually scanning documents onto her phone. As these issues weighed on me, the tension between us began to grow. I noticed that her habits had changed. Her schedule became less predictable. She started staying out late unexpectedly and leaving for the weekend without any reason. She would leave wearing one outfit and come back wearing another, dismissing any mention of spilled drinks. When I told her that I felt like we weren't spending enough time together and that she had changed, she dismissed my words, turned away, and told me I was crazy, with a contemptuous look on her face, avoiding my gaze. Soon she became very protective of her phone, wore new, more attractive clothes that I had never seen her wear before, and came home with stories that didn't add up. I found receipts from hotels that showed she had been there alone, even though she said she was with friends. When I shared my suspicions with her, she dismissed them, saying I was just overworked. But one night she came home late, her hair disheveled and her makeup smudged, and she smelled of something unfamiliar, a cologne I didn't recognize. I asked if she had been delayed, and she said that her Bible study had gone late and that they had gone out for dinner afterwards. But something didn't add up. Bible study always ended at 8 p.m., and she came home after midnight as if it were no big deal. I even smelled the cologne, and when I mentioned it, her tone changed. She became defensive instead of apologetic. She replied sarcastically, "Maybe if you weren't always at the office, I'd know something about your life." She was clearly avoiding the subject, and I couldn't press her for more information because at this point, if I asked her any accusatory questions, she would just paint me as an overly suspicious and neglectful husband. Instead, I employed a strategy of recording her credit card statements and checking her location history when she left her iPad unlocked. One useful thing I discovered was that women forget to log out of their accounts. Much to my dismay, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she would disappear for 2 to 3 hours to an address on the other side of town, a residential complex to be exact. One Thursday, I decided to leave work early, parked across the street from her house, and waited. At exactly 2 p.m., Jen arrived, and a tall guy who looked like her friend pulled up next to her. I even took a picture of them walking into the building together. And there was the same flirtatious atmosphere between them that she used to create around me. My blood boiled. I was furious. I wanted to jump out of the car and beat them up. I wanted to let out the anger that was raging inside me, but I held back, stayed calm, and consoled myself with the thought that revenge is a dish best served cold. 2 hours later, when Jen came out, I took a photo of them kissing, and that scene convinced me of what I had to do. The woman I had never been was no longer there. Another woman had taken her place. I found out the man's name, Eric, but my ex came home with Eric, even though one night when she left, I saw messages from him on her unlocked phone. He was a youth pastor at the church she attended, which added a bitter irony to the whole thing. Instead of talking to her right away, I started meticulously documenting everything. Neat screenshots of conversations, more photos of them together, random hotel receipts in her purse, a recording of a conversation in which she complained to Eric that she was going to leave me soon and they could finally be together. The cruelest blow was realizing how long she had been planning my destruction. Her text messages revealed a carefully thought-out plan. One message after another explained how she was going to use the relationship she had created with me to fleece me. The candor of her comments about waiting for the right moment and what that meant for me, given how busy I was at work, etc., and how she was going to clean me out, made it clear that she wasn't just thinking about running away, she was planning a move to a new life, leaving me in an extremely vulnerable position. At that moment, I vowed to myself that she would not leave with anything other than what the law required. A few hours later, I met with my accountant and casually mentioned that I wanted to restructure some things in my business. In the weeks that followed, I took tactical financial steps. I paid a year's rent for the office in advance, accelerated loan payments, and reduced my salary to leave more money in the company before it would show up on my personal financial statements. I purchased new equipment, purchases that I would eventually need, but weren't urgent at the time. Outwardly, I pretended that my firm was only facing potential cash flow problems, and no one suspected that I was depleting the company's liquidity. At the same time, I opened an account at a new bank in my name and started putting small amounts of money aside as a kind of safety net so that Jen couldn't get her hands on it. Everything was very transparent and well documented. I wasn't hiding money, I just wanted to make sure she didn't get more than she deserved. Then, completely out of the blue, Jen became an accomplice to her own demise. One ordinary Tuesday I came home and she was sitting on her throne, the couch, with a smug look on her face. "Mike," she said in a sweet voice, "we need to talk." I pretended not to understand what was coming. "I'm pregnant," she announced. Considering she hadn't let me near her for months, it was simply impossible, unless she was expecting a miracle. Without letting me say a word, she made the situation even worse. "But it's not your baby. I'm seeing someone else. I want a divorce." Her voice was so cold, so emotionless, as if she were ordering takeout. I felt rage wash over me, every cell in my body telling me to go up to her and show her the evidence I had gathered, to throw it in her face. But in an instant, the fog cleared. This was my chance. She didn't know what I knew, so she felt like she was in control. I smiled lazily and approached her again. "I see," I said, savoring the sweet taste of her confession on my lips. She instinctively knew I was about to explode. But I didn't, and I left her alone with her choice. She tried to dictate the terms. "You'll pay me alimony. I gave up my career for you." I narrowed my eyes at her. "You really thought I wouldn't find out about Eric?" She paled when I told her how I found out about her Tuesday and Thursday visits to the same house where that guy lived. "You didn't even bother to hide the evidence. Did you think I was that stupid?" When she tensed up, I added, "Your Bible study is taking a while, isn't it? I wonder what kind of course requires underwear in a hotel room." The panic in her eyes intensified tenfold, and I went even further. You and your, I cleared my throat, little boyfriend were just waiting for a chance to use me and run away together. What did you say? He won't suspect a thing. She gasped for air, trying to respond, but I didn't give her a chance to recover. I stood up and declared, "Let's get one thing straight. You're not going to win. You're not going to take anything from me that I don't give you." She tried to hide her fear behind a mask of arrogance. "It's the law, Mike. You can fight it all you want, but you'll lose." I smiled at her as smugly as I could and replied, "If you say so." She thought she had played a clever game and didn't know she had just done me a favor. I had to keep my cool while she thought she was in control. In the weeks that followed, things got even stranger. Jen immediately moved out and into Eric's apartment. Then she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences to soften her request to be allowed to sleep with other men. I met with several lawyers, and the first three more or less told me I was going to lose. No, their good news was that we lived in a no-fault divorce state, which meant that the fact that my wife had slept with a young pastor and gotten pregnant was irrelevant in court. I kept looking, determined that all of this had to go away, and eventually found a lawyer, let's call him Paul, who didn't wax poetic about the merits of our case. "Listen, I'm not going to lie to you," he said. "You'll probably have to pay her something, but we can minimize the damage." After I showed Paul my finances, he was surprised by the timing of some of my business expenses and reorganization. Technically, he couldn't advise me to hide assets, but he understood exactly what I was trying to achieve. When the dust settled after the divorce, I learned that although alimony in our state was significant, my smart financial moves could soften the blow. The court might not consider Jen's actions significant, but her church community certainly would. I kept my cool during the divorce and let her think she was in control, giving her enough freedom, and in the end, she destroyed herself. When I walked into the courtroom, I was wearing the best suit money could buy, and there was Jen with her lawyer, dressed like she was auditioning for a reality show about polygamy. Her behavior was almost clownish, especially since the judge looked bored before the proceedings even began. Jen's lawyer began his presentation with the obligatory tearful story. Jen, the long-suffering wife who put her promising career on hold to help me build my company, and who is now simply insisting on compensation for her contribution to our marriage. When I took the stand, my lawyer used evidence of infidelity, evidence of pregnancy, and the fact that she was already living with Eric. Her lawyer smugly interrupted him. "At least we live in a state where there is no fault." He told me that while my ex-wife regretted how our marriage ended, the law was simple. Conduct during marriage is not a factor in determining a spouse's right to alimony. Divorced spouses must consider economic inequality in the circumstances, not behavior. I was furious to hear such indifference to her infidelity and lies to me. She even left and slept with another man, expecting me to still pay her for abandoning our marriage. My lawyer tried to turn the case in my favor by explaining that Jen didn't just run away from the marriage, but would be protected as long as she lived with another man. But the judge just sighed boredly and waited for the verdict. And when the judge finally addressed the issue of infidelity, he did answer my questions about whether Jen was a cheater. But he again made it clear that marital infidelity and other marital transgressions had no bearing on the alimony decision. Jen smirked at me when she learned that because she was financially dependent on me during our marriage and was unemployed, the court ruled that she was entitled to alimony of $4,500 per month for 4 years, or until there was a significant change in circumstances or she remarried. The very thought of having to pay that kind of money to a woman who had betrayed me made me furious. And at least the brief affair reduced the amount of alimony compared to what I had expected, a whopping $6,000 a month. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. As we left the courtroom, Jen couldn't resist gloating and whispered, "I told you so." as we walked past. She thought she had won. She even had the nerve to call Eric right in front of me to brag about her victory, giggling like a schoolgirl. He has to pay. I told you the judge didn't care about the rest. I said nothing as she walked away, confident that she had pulled off the perfect scam. But I knew the game wasn't over yet. I paid the first installment immediately, without saying a word or even sending a confirmation email. Jen seemed puzzled by my lack of hostility, as if she wanted to provoke bitterness or confrontation that would give her more food for thought. Instead, I took on the role of the perfect ex-husband, polite, timely with money, and detached, but not hostile. She had no idea of the storm brewing. Jen wasn't just a member of Harvest Community Church. She was one of the people who posted on the cover, led the women's ministry, organized marriage retreats, and publicly preached the sanctity of marriage. The suburban world she grew up in was the epitome of church life. Her father was a deacon, her mother a Sunday school teacher. I knew that once she was exposed, they would have no qualms about betraying her. I gathered a mountain of evidence, DNA test results, time-stamped photos of Eric, screenshots of their explicit text messages, hotel receipts confirming the details of Chris's trip, and a recording of her mocking her church friends for their prudishness. I put everything in a neat folder with an official cover letter addressed to the church elders. To the elders of Harvest Community Church. I will regret telling you this, but as a man of faith, I feel it is my duty to inform you that my ex-wife, Jennifer Walker, co-leader of several ministries at your church, is behaving in a manner inconsistent with the teachings of your church. Documents confirming your affair, which began while she was married. The child is not mine, adultery, and a 92% vasectomy, unsuccessful DNA test. This man is now living with Jennifer and receiving large alimony payments from me. I am not sharing this out of malice, but out of a desire to serve the truth. Sincerely, Michael Walker. When no one was around, I dropped the package off at the church. Then I went home and waited for the hand of God or someone else to punish me. The next Sunday, my phone was blowing up with messages from mutual friends in the church community asking what I had done. Dude, the pastor just called an emergency meeting of the elders before the service. Jen is going crazy. After that, my phone died, and I fell back asleep, enjoying the peace of my choice. Later that day, I received a voicemail from Jen. She wasn't just upset, Bisgrave writes. She was outraged, her despair palpable as she screamed, "You're a piece of trash! How could you do this to me? They kicked me out of women's ministry. My father won't even look at me. You ruined everything." I deleted the voicemail and didn't respond to her negativity. Over the course of the week, her messages became increasingly desperate. Her friends from church stopped talking to her. Her parents prayed about it, a thinly veiled euphemism for disappointment. And the Christian school where she volunteered didn't want her back. Even Eric distanced himself, afraid of drama. He envisioned a life with a stunning wife and reliable alimony, not a rejected schoolgirl with a child and 3 truckloads of luggage. By Friday, he had kicked her out of his apartment. A week after I presented my evidence, Jen had a formal disciplinary hearing with the church elders. She called me in tears, begging me to tell them it was all a misunderstanding. "Mike, please, they're going to punish me publicly. Do you understand what that means? Everyone will know." In a steady voice, I replied, "They already know, Jen." That's how church gossip works. I could almost feel her despair when she said, "My father could lose his job because of this. My grandfather was there. My father was there. And I was there." I just looked at her and said, "Well, you should have thought about that before you slept with the young pastor." There was a pause, and she admitted that Eric wasn't talking to her. "Who? Your father?" I asked, pretending not to understand. "No, Eric. He says it's too dramatic," she said, realizing how much she had screwed up. I couldn't hold back my laughter. So your soulmate ran away as soon as things went south. That's terrible. I have nowhere to go, Mike. My parents won't let me stay with them. All my friends have stopped answering my calls. Friends, I said, seems like the big problem isn't mine. Find a hotel. You get child support. Figure it out. I hung up. What she put me through broke me. The church hearing took place on Wednesday evening, and by Thursday morning the report had gone viral. Jen was officially accused of marital infidelity and removed from church leadership. The pastor preached a sermon about the sanctity of marriage and the consequences of sin, effectively making a very pointed statement, without naming her, about who he was addressing. Her parents stepped down from their leadership positions in the church, and her sister reportedly postponed her church wedding. The entire family was now outcasts, and Eric requested a transfer to another church in another state, leaving his pregnant wife behind. I watched from the sidelines as the community she valued most did all the hard work for me. In small religious communities, the connections are very deep, and Jen's downfall, which set off a chain of events, was something I couldn't have orchestrated better myself. A few months later, the private Christian school where she worked part-time suffered budget cuts, resulting in her position being eliminated, and the director could barely look at her when he told her. Her volunteer work quickly came to an end. The crisis center for pregnant women where she had previously counseled young women deemed her position inappropriate, and the charity where she organized fundraising announced a reorganization that left her without a job. Everything she was, every part of her identity, was being stripped away, piece by piece. And all the while, I was writing her child support checks on time. 3 weeks after the church scandal, I received a text message from our former neighbor saying that Jen was living in her car in the Walmart parking lot. I didn't say anything, but I drove back there that evening. As expected, I saw her Honda at the far end of the parking lot, her dark figure illuminated by her phone screen. The next day, she called me again. "I lost my job," she said matter-of-factly, without her usual emotional venom. "No tears this time, just a hollow feeling of defeat." "That's too bad," I said. "The baby is due in 5 months. No one will hire me." I said nothing, just listened to her. "I'm living in my car," she finally admitted. "I can't pay for the car and rent on child support." "Sounds like you're not very good with money," I replied indifferently. "Is that what you wanted? To watch me turn to dust?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. I thought for a second before answering, "You know what? Yeah, I guess so." I was stupid. I made a mistake. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I interrupted her. "I don't care." She was choking on her sobs. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," I smirked. "Cool. Good luck with your new life." It was time to play my last card. I replied casually, "Well, I have a solution that might work for both of us." Jen perked up. She heard the desperation in her voice. "What solution?" "I'm tired of writing those monthly checks," I replied. "My business is growing, and I'm thinking about opening an office in Singapore. I might move away for a while." "What does that have to do with me?" she insisted. "Well, international alimony is complicated, and I've talked to a new lawyer who said we might have grounds to renegotiate the agreement based on some new interpretations of the law." I was lying, but Jen had no way of knowing that, and she wasn't in a position to ask any more questions. "I'm saying I want to buy you out," I added. "A one-time payment instead of monthly alimony for 4 years." She was silent, considering my offer. "How much?" she finally asked. $90,000 cash, no taxes. You sign a document releasing me from any future liability, and the money is yours." Jennifer didn't know that I could easily pay that amount thanks to my previous financial planning, which had protected most of my assets. For her, $90,000 was probably a lifeline, but it was less than half of what I would have had to pay her in alimony over the entire period. It was a huge discount. For a pregnant woman living in her car with no money in her pocket, It must have felt like winning the lottery. "I don't know," she stammered. "My lawyer said—" I interrupted her. "Your fucking lawyer doesn't sleep in a Walmart parking lot, and this offer is only good for 24 hours. Then I'll start the process of appealing the child support decision, and we'll see you in court in a year or two." There was a pause, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Sure. You have until tomorrow, or I'll approve the appeal." I hung up without waiting for her answer. 2 hours later, she called back, her voice quiet. "I agree. Smart choice. The paperwork will be ready in the morning. Meet me at 9 a.m. at my lawyer's office." "Mike," she whispered softly. "Thank you." I struggled to suppress a laugh and said, "Don't thank me, Jen." It's not compassion. It's business. The next morning, she walked into the lawyer's office, disheveled and tired. She had dark circles under her eyes, her hair was dirty, and she was wearing the same clothes I had seen her wearing in the car window. My lawyer had prepared the documents, a complete waiver of future alimony payments in exchange for a lump sum payment. I had brought a bank check with me. Jen barely glanced at the papers and signed them. When my lawyer put the check on the table, her hands were shaking as she took it. "Is that it? Are we breaking up?" She seemed confused. I nodded. "Completely. I don't want to see you or hear from you ever again." She seemed to want to say something else, but instead just nodded and left. After she left and the door closed, my lawyer shook his head and said, "You know, most guys in your situation wouldn't have given her anything. Now I'm paying $90,000 to get rid of her forever." And I meant it. The monthly payments weren't really a big burden for me, but every month they reminded me of how she had betrayed me. Now I'm free again, I can move on with my life, and she won't be haunting me anymore. I knew Jen well enough to know that not only would she blow through that money in 6 months, but she wouldn't get anything in return. No child support, no job prospects, no backup plan. Meanwhile, I was enjoying life, building an empire and vowing never to look back. About 6 months later, I unexpectedly ran into Jen at a gas station. It was pure coincidence. She looked exhausted, still pregnant, or maybe pregnant again. I didn't ask and didn't care. She was driving an old beat-up Civic that was a far cry from the nice car she had when we were married. I was standing there filling up my BMW, and she looked like a deer in the headlights. I nodded politely as she approached cautiously. The silence made her words seem awkward when she finally spoke. "How are you?" I shrugged. "Things are going well. Life is good." She nodded, looking down at her feet. That's a relief," she said, and an awkward silence fell between us. "I'm out of money," she finally admitted. "I had to pay off some debts and the rest went to rent and food." I just stared at her because, to be honest, I didn't want to get into a conversation. "I know. I don't know why I'm telling you this." I finished filling up and added, "Well, good luck with everything." As I started to walk back to my car, she called after me. "I'm sorry, Mike, for everything. I really am." I looked into her eyes for a long time. Was it nice to see her like that? To be honest, it didn't give me as much satisfaction as I thought it would, but I didn't feel sorry for her at all. "Too little, too late, Jen," I replied and drove away in my car. I haven't seen her since. My life is going great. I've met an amazing woman who is a successful marketing agent at her company. In bed and outside of it, she prefers casual sex and leaves her partners with a satisfied smile on their faces. When a hot and powerful man enters her bedroom and her life, she is intrigued. We have been living together for 3 months and are slowly getting used to the idea of marriage. Let's be honest, once bitten, twice shy. But I really see a future with her. She is perfect in every way. I tried not to get involved in Jen's business, but in a small town like this, news travels fast. We heard from mutual friends that the $90,000 I gave her had disappeared in 4 months. Apparently, she spent some of the money paying off credit cards I didn't even know she had, and with the rest, she bought a cheap apartment and blew it all trying to live the old way instead of adjusting to her new life. Classic Jen, budgeting has never been her strong suit. She has a child, a boy, but Eric may be held financially responsible for child support. As far as I understand, he is a deadbeat dad and owes child support. Since moving to Ohio, he has severed all ties with his child, confirming that his calling to work with young people does not extend to his own offspring. Jen tried to resume her teaching career, but her tarnished reputation preceded her to prison. No Christian school would hire her, and public schools required recent experience, which she did not have. Most recently, she was working in a call center, earning just above minimum wage. However, over time, sweet justice came to her family. Although her parents eventually forgave her after 8 months of ostracism, relations remained tense. They sometimes look after her child, but also criticize her for her poor decisions and for living with their consequences. Her sister keeps her distance, fearing that Jen's bad reputation could damage her reputation in the church. Jen has tried to return to the church community, but she has not been accepted back. She is allowed to attend services, but is not permitted to hold any leadership positions. She has been relegated to the back of the church, where she leaves immediately after the service, and has been stripped of her former position and influence. The greatest irony is that I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she regrets her actions, insisting that she made a mistake and should have worked harder on our marriage. It's a shame that it's too late for her. As for me, life has never been more satisfying. My business is thriving, my relationship with my wife is strong, and I've been able to do what I've always wanted to do but never had time for. I got my pilot's license, started mountain biking, and even learned to play the guitar. The lesson I learned from this experience is that even the most negative events can help us reveal our best selves. You just have to be willing to burn all your bridges and never look back.